All right, welcome everybody. We're very excited to have you tonight. Thank you for taking the time to spend part of your evening with us. My name is Sarah Kelly. I work at the Coaches Association of Ontario, and we are very excited to have Lisa Wells with us here tonight to do this webinar on bullying prevention in sports and how coaches can lead the way in helping to prevent bullying on their teams and in their sport organizations. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. This presentation is going to run from 7 to 8 p.m. and then we're going to have a brief Q&A afterwards. As well, the PD point survey will go into the chat at the end of Lisa's presentation at 8 o'clock. You can click on that link to fill it out and get your PD point. You should see it reflected on your locker over the next couple of days, probably early next week. If you have any technical difficulties or questions for us, you can send them in the question box. You'll see that in your panel. You can send that to us, and there's also a chat function that will send messages directly to us as well. At the end of the presentation, as I mentioned, Lisa is going to be taking questions. So if you have questions for her, you can put them in the question box throughout the presentation. You don't have to wait till the end. We'll remind you at the end, but if something pops into your head while she's talking, please feel free to put the question in there and we'll try to get to as many of them as we can at the end of the presentation. That's kind of all for housekeeping. I will turn things over to Lisa now. Lisa is definitely an expert in bullying and bullying prevention and education. She's been working in the school system across Canada since 1990. She's a huge advocate on mental health, wellness, and bullying prevention, and founded the Dare to Care program. She's worked with coaches as well. Specifically, she worked with the University of Calgary on a pilot program with them a couple of years ago, specifically looking at stuff through the coach lens, which is one of the many reasons we're very excited to have her here tonight. But I will let her delve into all of that. So without any further ado, Lisa, let me turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. And good evening, everybody. I can't see anybody, but I know you're out there. And just so you know, I am also not seeing any of the questions as they pop up. So please know I'm not ignoring you. I will address all of those at the end. So tonight really is very much a condensed version of what I would typically be presenting to coaches and board members, management, etc. And a little bit of background just before we jump in. Yes, I've been working in schools for 30 years, but the last 21 years has been in the area of bully prevention. And I developed Dare to Care out of there was absolutely a need to address the pervasive issue of bullying that we were seeing in schools at that time. But about 3 years ago, I was approached by the University of Calgary Swim Club, which is the second largest swim club in the country. And they asked me to take a look at their code of conduct. And I thought, you know, my background is sports. I was a competitive swimmer forever and still swim competitively with masters, you know, and have competed internationally. I love sports. It's part of my life, but I had never worked with a sport organization. So when University of Calgary Swim Club approached me, I said, you know, let's go better than just looking at your code of conduct. If I'm able to get funding, can I adapt our program from schools into the sports setting and work with all 650 swimmers? I think there were 42 coaches at that time with that club, and about 850 parents. And I adapted all of our programs and presented. And the whole point of it is I wanted to get some data. So there was pre-post surveys done. I wanted to see if our program could adapt well into sports. And I knew it would. I just wanted to have that evidence and see if we should go forward. I was absolutely not prepared for how impactful the program was at all levels of sport. You know, again, from athletes age 5 right through the varsity team, the parents, coaches, etc. So it's been awesome to return to sports, and we're still very much involved in schools as well. But the handout that was provided, there's a link to a coach's handout that will certainly allow you to go delve a little bit deeper into the issue. So again, if you've got any questions, a lot of those questions may be answered in that handout if you haven't already taken a look. So I want to just start out with sharing a couple of statistics with you. And these are based on a national study in Canada that looked at all sorts of communities. So it wasn't just sort of our bigger cities, it was looking at smaller communities, rural communities, First Nation, and our Indigenous communities. And what we found was, regardless of whether we're talking about the workplace, sport organization, or school, roughly 15% of, and I'll switch right over to sport organizations, 15% of the sport organization is being targeted with bullying behavior. There's lots of crazy statistics out there saying that 90% of kids are bullied, 70% of coaches are bullied, 80% of girls are sexually harassed by the time they are about age 13. There's a lot of crazy statistics out there that are very frightening, and they're wrong. They're based on the wrong definition of bullying. This whole idea that, you looked at me funny, that's bullying. You wouldn't talk to me today, that's bullying. I'm going to define bullying very, very carefully in a little bit, but what I want to just say is this 15% is based on the correct definition of bullying, basically that there is a pattern of negative behavior, repetitive negative behavior. The next percentage, the 6% in any sport organization who are involved in bullying behavior, this number actually is very inflated because it includes the henchmen, the followers, the posse, the minions, the puppets. These are names that kids themselves have come up with. The followers of the bully. So it could be one parent who is really the ringleader, but has a few parents sort of under their control. Those parents don't really like bullying. It doesn't come naturally for them, but they found themselves in this little parent group, and so they're guilty by association. Same with the athletes. You've got one ringleader who's got his or her little posse who go along with the bullying but actually feel a lot of guilt. So take the followers out of the mix. What we're left with in a sport organization is really only about 2% who we would define as displaying true bullying behavior, whether that's athletes, whether it's parents, coaches, management, 2%. So we're really a very, very small number, but they have this incredible influence and incredible power to change the dynamics. If you take it into the workplace, it only takes one toxic individual in a workplace to change the dynamics of that workplace. We'll take that into a sport. One toxic athlete, teammate, player, one toxic parent, one toxic coach can absolutely change the dynamics. So again, incredible amount of power there. But really the group that at Dare to Care we have always focused most of our energy on, it's the 79%. The 79% are those who witness it, who see it, who are the eyes and the ears of the organization. For the athletes, they're in the locker room, they're in the hotel room, on the bus, and at the back of the bus during travel tournaments, things like that. They see it, they know it's wrong, but they're not speaking out. And I don't believe it's got anything to do with apathy or not caring. I believe it's got to do with fear. For our athletes, they're very fearful to speak up, let a coach or a parent know, because they're afraid that if they tell the coach won't do anything, and then the bully will find out and there will be retaliation. They're fearful that if they tell a parent, that the parent might pull them from the sport. They're fearful to let anybody know because, and I would say probably age 9 and up, their biggest fear of all is being seen as a rat. And then being sort of rejected from their teammates. And this is exactly what bullies want. They want there to be fear, and they want their silence to occur, because let's face it, being a bully today, there's a hidden benefit. You get what you want when you want, and know that nobody's going to speak up. So our goal is really to mobilize that silent majority. And in order to mobilize that silent majority, a number of things have to happen. One, you need to have a very, very clear definition of bullying on your team, so there's no ambiguity. You need to have a very solid code of conduct, which I'm going to talk about a little later on. And coaches, you need to set the tone. You need to set the tone very early on each season, having a sit-down conversation about what will not be tolerated on the team, and then obviously modeling that and following through on any bullying behavior. So we're going to cover all of that tonight. A couple of sort of statistics before we move on. Most of you have probably seen the second statistic here: 7 out of 10 Canadian youth drop out of sport by age 13, never to return to organized sport again. And while there are all sorts of reasons that might be occurring, that they're dropping out of sport, the number one reason stated by youth themselves, the athlete themselves, is it stopped being fun. It became way too much pressure. They didn't feel a sense of belonging in their team, and they didn't feel like they added any value, or they were told they didn't add any value. So the fun was gone. They dropped out of sport, and what's frightening is the alternative to sport is a very really sedentary lifestyle, which leads to so many other complications. And this whole idea about having a clear policy, this third point here, I am going to talk about the policy. I do know that all sports, individual organizations, teams, clubs, have some sort of discipline policy, code of conduct, whatever, policies and procedures, whatever you want to call it. But I'm going to challenge everybody who's listening tonight and just say, take a look at your code of conduct, discipline policy, and does it say enough about bullying? I think bullying is so pervasive in sport. It's the hidden culture of sport that it requires its own code of conduct. And I'll explain why and how a little bit later in this hour. And if you don't have a code of conduct, that is the starting point, absolute starting point. If you want to make sure you're maintaining a safe and caring atmosphere for your children and your coaches to thrive in, that code of conduct is going to go a long way. Because I'm a huge advocate about mental wellness and athletes, developing the entire athlete, not just the performance athlete, we know that this is a Canadian statistic that 50% of lifetime mental illness begins actually before age 14. So if we're waiting to, monitor our athletes' mental health once they're in the sort of beyond the developmental stage, so in high performance, we've missed a great opportunity. Our youngest athletes, our youngest coaches, need to learn a little bit of, the signs and symptoms, what to watch for, because obviously mental illness is playing a huge role in sports. And thankfully, we're seeing more and more athletes come out. I don't know if any of you saw it, and now my mind's going blank. It just came out on Netflix, and it sort of follows 7 or 8 different high performance athletes, Michael Phelps being one of them, high performance athletes telling their story about mental illness. And if you haven't seen it, if anybody can remember the name of it, please put it up or post it so other coaches can see it. All right, so let's dive into this. One of the biggest roadblocks you will have in the area of dealing with bullying in your own specific, on your own team, in your own club, is when everybody is defining the issue of bullying differently. I think you'd all agree the word bullying has become so overused and misused in the last, I'm going to say even decade, that people aren't even taking it seriously anymore. In sport, it's very easy for bullying behavior to be disguised as team building, as building mental toughness. That hidden culture of aggression is there. Bullying is alive and well on every team, regardless of the sport, and it really comes down to carefully defining it. So these 3 points need to exist in order for us to define it as bullying behavior. So first, targeting an individual or group with repetitive and intentional negative actions. The word repetitive means there has got to be a pattern of behavior. It's not a one-off. It's not something that happens once in September at the beginning of the season and then mid-season. It is repetitive. It may not be that this individual is targeting the same person over and over, but their behavior represents this pattern of negative behavior. In schools, we always say, because you've got your kids 5 days a week, we always say that if a child is displaying negative, mean-spirited behavior for a week or longer, that is no longer considered normal behavior or conflict. That is bullying behavior. In sports, it's a little bit more difficult for your younger athletes who may only be training, practicing twice a week. It's hard to say, you know, if it's happening for a week or longer because they're only training twice a week. For your more high performance, high level athletes who are training every single day and then having, you know, competitions, tournaments, bonspiels, whatever on the weekend, as coaches, you should be able to identify that repetitive nature. The intentionality behind it is really important as well, because bullies are premeditated. They are intentional in their behavior. There's another group of kids I'm going to talk about this evening called provocative children, who very much thrive in individual sports. And I'll explain why in a moment, or in a little while. But they often are, these provocative children always seem to be in everybody else's business. So their name keeps coming up as being problematic. And so by the very definition of bullying, that it's repetitive, these kids who are actually provocative children are often labeled as bullies, and they're not, because their behavior is not intentional. They actually don't even realize how they're coming across, or that they're annoying others, or that personal space is an issue. They are oblivious to that. So it'll make more sense when I talk about provocative children in a little bit, but this intentional idea, when it comes to bullying, they are 100% intentional. So let's say I was a bully on my basketball team, and I've moved. My parents have moved, so now I'm joining a new basketball team. I am going to fight hard to get that status again, not to label myself as a bully, but that status, that power. I am going to look for kids, my teammates, who I can pick on, and those who give me a reaction, cry, get frustrated, get angry easily, they're my targets for the season. I am intentional and premeditated. I'm going to stay away from the kids who have confidence, who stand up to me, but I am going to find those the weaker links on the team that I can get away with. So again, bullying is repetitive, there's a pattern of behavior, and it is intentional. The next factor that needs to exist is an imbalance of power. In normal peer conflict, there is no imbalance of power. It is two athletes or two kids going at it. They have a misunderstanding, miscommunication, they don't agree on something, and it causes disruption. The point being, in conflict, it is equal power. It's almost like, I say it's like a dance. One kid says something, the other kid throws it back at them, that banter, that trash talk. It's back and forth, back and forth. It becomes drama when the one kid goes and gets his little group of friends and talks smack about the other kid. And then the other kid goes and gets his group of friends. And now it's this group, these two groups going at it, and it gets ugly and nasty and loud, and for coaches it's the worst nightmare because it's chaos. But it's still not bullying because it's equal power. It's banter back and forth. They're tossing it back and forth. It becomes bullying when the imbalance of power becomes so great that the one person has so much power over the other that they basically deem their target helpless. They have so much power, even more so because they and I'm sort of showing, if you're seeing me on the screen, you know, here's conflict, it's equal power. Here is bullying. The person on the top, the person with all the power, has even more power because they look around and they They see their teammates giggling, laughing, joining in, or just standing there and doing nothing. And that in itself gives them this greater sense of power. And on the flip side, the individual being targeted has no power, even less because they look around and that they see their teammates doing nothing to support them. So again, that imbalance of power. Now, in the real world, we can't measure imbalance power, but coaches, you can measure the repetitive nature and be very, very aware. You know, if you suspect that one of your players, athletes, teammates is bullying others, just be very, very aware of their behavior. Don't toss it aside as them just joking around. If you're seeing this common theme, repetitive nature, you need to act on that. And the last part, the last bullet here, unequal levels of affect. This is emotion. In conflict on a team, coaches, you'll see it, you'll hear it. There's emotion evolved, and the two parties or the two groups are expressing anger, frustration, anxiety, whatever it may be. And as a coach, at least that's a red flag for you to go and step in and sort of calm them down and work out, you know, problem solve what's going on and how can we fix it. I wish it were that easy when it comes to bullying. The problem is when it's a bullying situation, there is really no emotion being shown. Kids already by age 8, age 9 at the very latest, have figured out that if they show emotion, it will make it worse. So they suppress that emotion, they internalize it, and that emotion isn't going to disappear. That emotion is going to, over time, manifest into all sorts of issues, mental health issues, dropping out of sports, you know, anxiety, in school, it's, you know, not performing well, and in sports, not performing well. That emotion is there, but these athletes are not showing it. And on the flip side, the individual who is bullying is typically devoid of any emotion. They don't think what they're doing is wrong. They see nothing wrong with it. They get a kick out of it, but you're simply not going to see the emotion. So for a coach, it's very, very hard to see this. And let's face it, people who bully don't do it in front of adult eyes most of the time. The bullying among teammates is going on in unsupervised areas, as you know, in the locker room, on the bus, in the hotel rooms. It's unsupervised area, or as a coach when you're working with somebody else. So all the more reason that we need to mobilize the masses, the teammates, the parents, other coaches, to speak up when they hear, when they witness any form of bullying. So again, these three factors need to exist. Most importantly, and I think the most obvious for you, is that repetitive nature. Here's another way of looking at it, and when we work with the kids in school or athletes, when we're doing our athlete sessions, you know, this is something that we would share with them to help them understand the difference between a mean moment, which we all have. It's usually based on emotion. We're angry, we're frustrated, we're hurt, and we lash out. It happens one time, it's on purpose, we want to hurt that person's feeling, and it's one-sided. That is a mean moment, and that is a normal part of life. Conflict, which is also a normal part of life, happens between two parties, equal power. It's on purpose, and it can be hurtful. That banter can get very, very disruptive and hurtful, but it's short-lived. And like I said before, usually less than a week. A conflict can last 10 minutes. It could last a day. It could last up to a week. Anything going over a week, when you start to see the shift of one-sidedness, one person having more power than the other, then we're shifting into the area of bullying. So just another way of looking at it. It's so important that every member of your sport organization, from management right down to your youngest athlete, understand the difference between conflict and bullying. The types of aggression I'm not going to go into. I think we all realize there's far more than just physical and verbal forms of aggression. And in sports, all of these types of bullying exist, some more so than other, depending on the sport culture, depending on the sport itself. But the two types of bullying that exist among all sports, one is social alienation, which is the rumors, the gossiping, and excluding from the group. We used to say that this was more evident in girls. It was kind of the tactic of choice for girls, but we're seeing it more and more boys joining in now with the rumors, gossiping, excluding from the group. And what is making it so easy, and I hope some of you are recognizing there's one massive form of bullying that I don't have on this slide, and it goes along with social alienation, and that is cyberbullying. And again, just because of the length of this particular webinar, I can't go into detail. There's a lot of information on the handout, that the link to the handout that I've provided. But as coaches, this is something that you, with the board, need to make a very serious decision on. The use of technology. Are your athletes allowed to have their cell phone in the locker room? Are they allowed to, at tournaments, bonspiels, swim meets, competitions, are they allowed to carry their phone with them? That is, I have a strong opinion on that, and I would say no. I would say that those phones need to be parked in a locked locker, or in the car. We survived. For those of you who were athletes back in the day before cell phones, we all survived without our cell phones. If our parents needed to get a hold of us, they were able to get a hold of us. So I do have a strong opinion. Plus, you see in various sports where the athletes aren't tuning in to other athletes, aren't watching other athletes perform or cheering for them. They're too busy on their phone. But the other area that they get themselves in trouble with is the law, and this is a reality. I'm really going to simplify this, but you'll definitely get the gist of it. Under Canada's Youth Criminal Justice Act, between the ages of 12 to 18, a child can be charged for just about anything. I mean, if they're doing something seriously wrong, they can be charged. One thing I want to say, and it was brought up yesterday, I was hosting a webinar of 400 students across Canada. And one asked about the 5-star, and I don't know if you're familiar with this. I thought it was done. I thought this was a done trend, but apparently it's not. And it's when one child or one athlete goes up to another and smacks them, and the whole goal is to leave an imprint of all 5 fingers. And there's been severe injuries occur because of that. Now, it wasn't the intention of the person who was doing the 5-star to hurt the person, but they slipped or they tripped over a bench and, were taken to the hospital. That's assault. That's assault with bodily harm, and there are severe criminal charges laid against that. So again, spitting on someone, sending hate messages, intimidating, threatening someone. Under the Youth Criminal Justice Act, there are charges, but the one charge that I think as coaches you need to be very familiar with, and this does bring into question whether cell phones should be allowed in the locker room or, at a competition. Possessing, producing, or sharing an intimate photo of someone without their consent is a serious criminal offense. And I think we all know that. We realize that. Possessing, if somebody sends a picture to you and you save it on your phone, that could be, even with their consent, could be seen as possession of pornography if they are underage. Producing, so making videos, taking videos in the locker room of people in any state of dress or undress, and then sharing that out to the masses is obviously criminal offense. But what I think our younger athletes need to realize is, even if somebody willingly shares a semi-nude or nude or sexual photo with them, the moment they save it and then share it, if they are underage and the person who is sending it is underage, that is possession and distribution of child pornography, and one of the most serious charges under the Youth Criminal Justice Act. So the bottom line for most of the athletes you're dealing with, unless you've got your high performance older athletes or varsity, is a person under the age of 18 simply cannot possess, produce, or share any photo of anyone that is sexual in nature, whether it's with consent or without. And that's where our kids are getting themselves in a lot of trouble, a lot of trouble. So even if somebody sends their boyfriend or girlfriend a partially nude picture over Snapchat, thinking that it will disappear after 10 or 15 seconds, the fact that they are underage and sent that picture, that is distribution of child pornography. On the receiving end, if the person who gets that photo saves it onto their phone, that is possession of child pornography. So it can get very ugly very, very quickly. So I just want you to be, and that's laid out very clearly in the handout as well. So again, I think it warrants some discussion at every level of sport, what you want your children, your athletes to be able to carry around, what technology you want them to be able to carry around with them. So provocative kids, I really want to spend a few minutes on the provocative athletes, provocative children. These are kids who are often very, very bright, not often in the way that school would define academic success. These are just really intuitive kids who know a lot about a lot of things. They're very big picture oriented. These are the entrepreneurs of the world. These are the Bill Gates of the world. You know, we can go on and on. These are children who are bright, but socially they are very, very challenged. They're restless. They often irritate others without knowing. They don't have a filter. They don't know when to stop, and they don't read body language. So even if somebody's very angry with them, they won't pick up on that social cue, and they keep doing it and doing it. And it doesn't matter how many times you remind them as a coach, you know, to stop sitting so close, or stop, you know, following so close to somebody during a drill. The next day they're doing it again, and it's very frustrating for a coach, but I need you to understand where this is coming from. They absolutely do not pick up on social cues, and they are very visual, so lecturing does not help them. Visually, you know, laying out the rules on a whiteboard for them, role playing with them, this would be more for the parents, I guess, videotaping them interacting with their teammates with permission of the parents, so the child can see how they are acting, because they really are not able to self-monitor. So the two words that are most likely used to describe these kids, our provocative athletes, are they're very annoying and they're weird. And I think I mentioned this a bit earlier. These kids are in every sport, but they do not do very well in a team sport. So they do seem to migrate around age 10, age 11 into more of the individual sports. And I'm thinking there's probably a few coaches sort of nodding their heads right now and going, yep, that's it. That's exactly what's happening. They do fight back in bullying situations, but they lose. Because they don't have support. They are lucky to have one teammate as a friend, and even luckier to hold on to that teammate as a friend. They are loners. They're not loners by choice. They just do not fit in socially. So they have to sort of fight their own fights. And the one thing I will say about these kids is they have a very, very strong sense of fairness. And so when they don't see things as being fair, they will fight for it, and they'll stick their noses into other people's arguments because they don't think it's fair. And for themselves, if they don't think they're being treated fairly, and they're certainly not getting any support from teammates, eventually they do erupt, and they could lash out and they could fight. They'll lose, and then who gets blamed? They do, because nobody stands up for them. Their teammates don't stand up for them or with them in going to a coach and saying, you know, actually it was Sylvia who has been provoking this kid over and over and over again. So my heart goes out to these kids. They they're often difficult to recognize as targets because they are vocal and they do attempt to stand up for themselves, but because they lack social skills, they don't do a very good job and they continue to be targeted. They often are diagnosed with ADD or gifted somewhere on the autism spectrum, nonverbal learning. It doesn't matter what the diagnosis is. The bottom line is the one thing that is really getting them in trouble in schools and in sports, in any social setting, is that lack of social skills. And social skills can be taught. It's not up to you, the coach, to teach that, but be aware that that's what's going on. And what we would ask you to do if you do have a child like that is to be, instead of just ignoring them because they're tough. I mean, they can really grate on your nerves, but really maybe spend a week watching them interact during practice and after practice, or at a competition meet, bonspiel, whatever. Watch them interact with their teammates and start to pick out the social skills that they need to work on, and then sit down with the parent and pick one at a time to start working on. These kids are visual, so again, lectures don't work. So I want to give you an example of something that does. My daughter was a swim coach for years and was always coaching the younger, sort of the 7 to 9 year olds. And a couple of years ago, she definitely had one boy who fit this description to a T. And the problem was, you know, he wasn't well liked. He had a lot of talent. These kids, if focused, can be brilliant, brilliant athletes. And being that my background is swimming, I will throw out the name Michael Phelps. Classic provocative individual, was not well liked, struggled with his coach right through all of the Olympics, and acknowledges now that lack of social skills. But you know, these kids aren't well liked. So my daughter had this boy on the team. Now, they often have a lot of social skills that are lacking, but for this individual, he was an incessant talker. Talked over people, talked through people, talked throughout workout, and would interrupt workout repeatedly. So my daughter came up with a scheme, pulled him aside one day and said, listen, you are going to be allowed 3 non-swimming related questions every workout. And on the whiteboard, I'm just going to put a check mark. None of the other kids knew what this was about, but the kid did. It was visual for him. So he knew when he, you know, 1, 2, and he knew when he would have only 1 question left. And, you know, it'd be in the middle of workout and he'd interrupt a set that all the kids were doing and be about to ask a question. My daughter would simply say, do you want to waste this last question? You only have 1 left. And you go, nope. And he'd push off and continue with the set. So that visual sort of, you can, as a coach, have some sort of visual cue with the athlete that they are you know, talking too much, or they're interrupting too much, or that they're annoying other kids. Come up with some social cue or some cues, because the 2 social skills that are lacking in every provocative target child I have ever worked with. One is personal space. They do not understand personal space. They don't want people in there invading their space, but they are all over everybody else, and they just don't understand how annoying that is. And you can see where kids lash back at that. But the second, and it's related, social skill that's lacking is that inability to pick up on social cues, to read body language, to read and hear tone of voice. When tone of voice shifts, coach, if you're frustrated with them and your tone of voice is getting harsher and harsher, they're not picking up on that tone of voice, which is going to annoy the heck out of you because it's like they're being defiant. But that's not what's going on here. They're just not picking up on those social cues, which are critical in life. So again, social skills are lacking, and the reason I'm bringing these kids up is they are often labeled as bullies, and I've yet to see a provocative child that truly is a bully because they don't have the support. Bullies have support, they have their posse, and throw out anything you've ever read that says that an individual that bullies has low self-esteem, they bully in order to feel better about themselves. That is a total lie, a total myth. True bullies, that 2%, the true bullies, actually have a very inflated self-image of who they are and how they fit in this world. And it makes sense. They get what they want when they want, and nobody's going to stop them. Whereas a provocative child has a very, very low self-esteem and no support network. Yes, they might lash out, and yes, there needs to be consequences for that, but please be careful that they are not labeled a bully. And this last bullet, I need to find a better way of describing this, but they tend to make adults feel like they deserve it. So as a coach, when you see other kids lash out at them or be rude to them or ignore them, in your mind, you might be thinking, well, yeah, they deserve it. But they don't. These kids are sweet, sweet kids who are just lacking social skills. And that's where the parents and the schools need to really work together. Social skills can be taught, and the earlier we catch on and provide these opportunities for the kids, the better off they're going to be. So I'm sure there's probably a few questions about this at the end, but I want to move on here and spend a couple of minutes just about parents. Well, we need to hold kids accountable, and kids need to hold kids accountable, but parents need to hold themselves accountable as well. And here's a list of nightmare parents. If any of you have been coaching for a year or more, you've probably seen a parent that checks off all of these on the list. You know, living their own athletic dream, emphasizing sports over sportsmanship, questioning the coach, spreading rumors, gossiping, undermining the coach, all of those things. The beauty of this is the majority of parents are very supportive and very, very behind the coaches and supportive of the children. But like I said earlier, it only takes one or two toxic parents to really make life difficult for everybody. So your code of conduct is not just for holding kids, your athletes accountable. It's holding parents accountable as well. And like I said, we'll talk about the code of conduct in a few minutes, but I do want to share what I think is a very, very powerful video. It's one that I've shown to parents in multiple sports when I'm presenting to the parent group of a sport organization. And I was not, the first or second time I showed this, I was not expecting the response I got. But when the lights went on after the video, I would say 50% of the parents were in tears. So it's really, I think, something all parents should see. So I'm going to throw this over to Sarah and Eric, I believe, who are controlling the video.
One, two, three, 4, 5.
All right, you guys ready?
I prefer that my parents, if I play bad, don't say anything. And if I play well, it doesn't really matter if they compliment me on how I play. I just I don't know, I prefer my parents to, not talk as much.
I can hear them like cheering me on, and I'm like thinking in my head, just shut it, I'm trying to focus.
My mom yells in Spanish, like, go, go, go.
My mom usually says, use the backboard. You should use the backboard. I get angry because it annoys me.
I'm kind of embarrassed.
She tells me to get in the position that my coach told me not to get in. I'm like, well, no. And then she's like, get in your position. I'm like, no.
I get a little tense when I have a certain score to get, and she's like, you gotta get that whatever score. And I'm like, ah. I don't like it when they try to push me even more, even though I'm trying really, really hard.
Coming from the coach's mouth is kind of better I feel like because your parents are there to support you and your coach is there to help you, you know?
You just start screaming, Valentina, run faster, make a basket. But I just start going slower every time when she says that.
The other people were like, wow, that mom is like really wanting her kid to win.
In my inside, you can't see it, but I'm inside saying, be quiet, be quiet, be quiet. Sometimes I just look into space.
I try to listen to them and then do what they say to so they don't start yelling again.
I don't really want them to give me that much advice because then I might forget it all.
Sometimes I get nervous.
When they yell and nobody else is yelling.
Sometimes it can embarrass me, like a lot.
Wait. What's going on? We're just trying to do this, but you want us to try harder?
Well, I am.
I'm not going into a game not trying my hardest. That'd be like messed up.
Yeah, it's a lot of pressure.
Sometimes when they try to get the ball in basketball, you kind of think in your head that they're kind of like gonna push you and you're gonna fall and hurt yourself.
They don't need to like always be like telling me what to do like every minute of the game. They kind of just gotta let me play.
I love when you say it like really nice. I got it, Mom.
I'd like to look back and I'd like to see you like smile or like give me a thumbs up.
Mom, I wish you would be a little bit quieter. Say like you played good and like you couldn't get them next time.
When they smile and say like good job.
Mom and Dad,
Thank you for loving me.
I love
Be my supporter.
when I'm upset, my mom and dad cheer me up.
Sometimes I forget about all the work that they do for me.
Be my biggest fan.
We need a lot of love. I want you to know
I need big hugs.
I love the snacks that you bring me. It makes me happy when you always encourage me.
Thank you, Mom and Dad.
Please just be my mom and dad. Yep, that's it.
All right, let me just get my screen back up here. One moment. So it's a pretty powerful check-in for many parents, and I just want to add this too. There's a fabulous documentary that was made in 2015, but still holds even more true today, called Trophy Kids, that perhaps some of you have seen. It was on Netflix. It's no longer on Netflix, but I did check it out last night. It is on iTunes and highly worth the watch. So again, parents need to be part of the whole process, engaging them in creating a safe, caring environment for your athletes to thrive in is only going to happen if we hold the few accountable who are causing all the issues. So, and obviously coaches as well, holding each other to a higher standard. You've probably seen a similar statement of just the absolute impact a coach has, lifelong impact a coach can have. I guess it comes down to, what kind of impact are you having on the kids? Is it positive and, life-changing and life-learning, or negative and damaging? Are you one of the reasons kids are dropping out of sports? And reflecting on that once in a while is important. And just on a side note, a couple of weeks ago, I won't mention any names, but one of historically Canada's top swim coaches passed away, and he ended up, once he built a huge dominant force in Canadian swimming, he and along with a couple of other incredible coaches back in the late 70s, early 80s, he went on to Australia and made Australia's swim team a powerhouse as well. he passed away, and it was interesting to see all the posts on Facebook from Australia Swimming and how positive and you know, just how impactful he had been, and he had been. There's no doubt about it. But I happen to be Facebook friends with a lot of swimmers who swam under him back in the day, and it was very, very interesting and almost sad to read their comments. And while none of them denied the impact he had in terms of their performance, there wasn't a lot of positive to say about his character, and we're talking 40 years ago. So you will be remembered as a coach. So, you know, how do you want to be remembered? Just like the definition of bullying for kids and for your parents, there are, well, maybe I'll backtrack a little bit. I'm not going to go through this list because I'm looking at the time here. Common coaching characteristics that are often mistaken as bullying. This is something that in a parent session I do go through. Often, you know, parents have become a little bit too over-involved a lot of the time and question and undermine coaches a great deal of the time, and get upset if you enter their child in an event that they don't think they're ready for, or if you bench their child, and you know, they're just speaking out too much. And I think it's important for parents to understand that if their child is in a sport, there's going to be expectation, and there's going to be some, you know, some behaviors from the coach that may look like bullying, but absolutely is not. It's part of being in a sport. So while I'm not going to go through this, this is in your handout. But let's just jump to policies and procedures, code of conduct. You know, how are we going to, your discipline policy, whatever you call it, how are we going to hold everybody accountable? And I do have a very strong opinion on this, and I do know that most sport organizations do have a code of conduct that either they've created or that's come down from the, you know, provincial sport organization or national sport organization. The one problem I see, though, is that in most code of conducts, bullying is kind of lost within the entire code of conduct. And bullying is pervasive and impactful enough that it requires, I truly believe this, requires its own code of conduct or policies and procedures. And I mean, this year is whacked. I know sports are starting up, and in Alberta, we've just shut down again for 2 weeks. Ontario, I know you're at different levels, depending on what city you were in and where you're situated in the province. And I think that's probably true in almost every province. So it's not like there was this nice startup in September, smooth startup. So this is a weird year, but what I can say, in a normal year, it is the first 6 weeks of that season, that sports season, where the new bully target dynamics start up. And I'm not saying that it doesn't, you know, carry over from last year, but with new athletes coming in, some moving out of that age group, going into a different category, new coaches, new families coming in, the dynamics do change. And it's within the first 6 weeks that that's going to be established. So within the first 6 weeks, the code of conduct that's specific to bullying needs to be presented, but do not do it right at the beginning of the season. Parents are inundated with school forms to sign, sports forms, you know, equipment sign up, you know, whatever, FOIP forms. They're just inundated. And if you're having them sign off on a code of conduct, trust me, they're not reading it. So wait. I would say 3 or 4 weeks into the season, and I'm happy to share the sample code of conduct that the University of Calgary Swim Club and I came up with 3 years ago. I've been sharing that across the country, and it's not that I mean for you to adopt it completely, but take a look at it and see where you might be able to make your code of conduct around bullying just a little more clear and concise, so that you don't have the lawyer parents sort of reading or spinning and reading through the lines or between the lines. So what we did is, it is important that not only do you have the expectations and the sort of the policies around what is acceptable in on your team, you also have to have the actionable steps. What are you going to do as a coach if somebody on your team is bullying somebody else? What are you going to do? So this is the steps in dealing with athletes who are displaying bullying behavior. So once you've determined that there is a pattern of negative behavior, the primary coach will meet with the athlete and the code of conduct will be reviewed. Parents and head coach will be contacted. And I'm saying primary coach because I think it's really important that whoever is coaching that child is part of the process, not just the head coach coming in. If the primary coach is really young, which is true in many, many cases, the coaches of the younger kids are very, very young themselves. They may not feel comfortable dealing with this on their own, and that's fine. The head coach can be involved, but please have that primary coach as part of the process. And then you document and you file it with the board. And that word document seems to scare people because we think more in terms of, legal documents or police documents. Document is just simply somewhere on your phone or somewhere where you can document what's happened, who's involved, and when did it happen, so that you can start to paper trail and show that pattern of behavior for that particular athlete. Our hope would be after that first meeting and warning that the athlete would change their ways. But if they blow you off and they're doing it again, the next step is, it just gets a little bit more advanced. Formal investigation, usually by the board, is conducted. Athletes are spoken to, the parents are involved, the athletes involved. Code of conduct is reviewed yet again, and at any point, consequences might be, step one, there might be consequences for it. Step two, there might be consequences, but the point being is there's some sort of procedure here, and it's documented again so that no parent can say, well, nobody warned me or nobody told me that my child was behaving that way. It is documented. By the third time, now that's when we're saying enough is enough. We've tried everything to make this safe for our athletes. You're not paying attention, you're not changing your ways, so this is your final warning. And that final warning is documented, and if the child does it yet again, that's it. They're gone. They're removed from the organization, and that is documented and filed with the organization so that 3 years down the line that the family doesn't return again saying, well, nothing happened, we're good now. You need to stand tough on this. And yes, it means you might lose your top athlete, but I'm telling you from the experience, you follow through on this, yes, you lose your top athlete, perhaps, but you're going to get other top athletes from around the city, from around the province who want to be part of your team, because clearly bullying is not tolerated. At the very bottom in fine print, it says, at any step, consequences may be given and the police may be contacted, depending on the severity. So again, going back to sexting or a physical assault, even if it's step one, the first time you're dealing with this kid, if it's criminal in nature, you need to involve the police. That's a judgment call, again, on the severity of the issue and whether or not you need the police to be involved. But at least this is laid out, and so all coaches need to follow this. If only one coach is doing it, you're basically giving the athletes the message that this is not a club, a team that's taking this seriously. So why should they speak up? Why should they put themselves in that position to speak up and be part of the caring majority rather than the silent majority? So these steps will help you as a coach follow through, but we also have steps for the parents, and they're very, very similar. It's 4 steps. The third step, there's a warning. You're always documenting, and the final step is they're removed. And keep in mind, it's only a small number of athletes and a small number of parents that you even may have to go through this process. If it's just normal conflict, that's going to work itself out. Bullying needs to have these clear steps. And then as coaches, coaches as well need to be held accountable, and there's steps in dealing with the coaches. So I am happy to share that, whether that's, share with Sarah and Eric and they fan it out, or you contact me individually. either way. I'm not going to have time to go through this. We've covered that all. I'm looking at the time, and I'm just going to finish off by saying it is no longer acceptable to allow bullying to occur in any format on your team at any age. And if we're waiting to step in, you know, once the athletes are 12, 13, 14 years of age, I'm not saying we've missed the boat. I'm just saying we're making it so much more difficult. This kind of accountability, education, you know, making sure all the athletes know the difference between bullying and conflict, and that expectation placed on them that they need to step up and report bullying. That has got to start right with your youngest age group, age 5, age 6, age 7, whatever age group is your youngest age group. So I know I've shared a lot and talking very rapidly here, but I hope this sort of helped identify maybe some areas in your organization that you need to improve upon, or steps that you need to be taking, or even simply that whole definition of bullying and how it differs from conflict. Hopefully that has helped. But my contact information is up here. Happy to answer any questions now or later on in the middle of the night. If questions come to mind, make sure you email me for sure. But I'm going to pass it over to Eric and Sarah now to take over questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lisa. That was a fantastic hour, and it went by in a flash. So I'm sure, like me, everyone else has taken a lot in, and already have some stuff that they can put into practice right away. So thank you for that. I am going to open up the floor to questions now. If you have questions, please put them into the question box, and we'll try and get through as many as we can here. Also, with regards to the code of conduct that you mentioned, we can send that with the handout after.
Okay.
We will be sending the handout that Lisa referenced, as well as the sample code of conduct. We can send that out to everybody post-webinar. All right, so I'm just going to wait for a few seconds. I could see people writing in, so we'll wait to get some questions.
And I have a tickle in my throat, so excuse me 1 second.
All right. Okay, so we have one coming in here. Sorry, make my screen bigger. Bear with me a second. What do you do when you've had as a coach or a teacher, when you've clearly outlined behavior expectations, a team mission statement, and a code of conduct, and then you hold your athletes or students accountable to this, not provocative children, but the rest of your, athletes and students, and parents claim bullying behavior? How do you deal with that?
Well, and I think first and foremost, that education piece for all the parents to understand the difference between conflict and bullying is going to resolve a lot of that issue. I'll just quickly say, you know, when I was doing a pilot project with the University of Calgary Swim Club, they're so large, they actually had a dedicated harassment officer. And they've changed the name now to make it sound more positive, but you know, her whole role was to take in complaints around bullying and investigate. And the year before Dare to Care came in and worked with everybody, she spent 173 hours just in investigation of bullying instances alone. The year after Dare to Care, it was 0. And it was because athletes, right through parents, coaches, management, now understood the difference. And so there weren't false reports or inappropriate reports. I mean, if there's conflict, it may still require some investigation, or, you know, the coach to step in. And I'm not saying to ignore conflict. I'm just saying that education piece is critical. And I think that in itself, you'll find a huge difference in the number of bullying reports.
And then further to that, when you hold your athletes or students accountable, what do you do when parents claim that you, the coach, are bullying them?
Yeah, and that's going to happen all the time. I'll say that the number one thing that a parent or a child will do who fall under that, you know, title of bully, is the first thing we'll do is absolutely deny any wrongdoing on their child's part or their part, and spin the tables and place the blame on somebody else. That's what they do, and it's their way of engaging you in a power struggle. That argument, he said, she said, he did, she did. If we had more time, I would talk about how to take a no-nonsense approach to a parent like that. What it is, and I'll just really briefly do it, is if a parent comes storming in, like, how dare you say that my child's doing this, it's everybody else is picking on my child. As a coach, because you've been documenting and you have evidence that there's this, pattern of behavior, your response should be very short and brief and simply, what your child is doing will not be tolerated on the swim team. Well, that sucks because everybody else is doing it. You're just out against my family and my kid. You say it again, short and succinct. What your child did will not be tolerated. Please reread the code of conduct, and when you're ready to talk calmly, I am here. And that's when, this is the toughest part of all, you need to turn and walk away. Because a bully will engage you in a power struggle, and as soon as they engage you, they will win. They will have your head spinning that so fast that you'll just want to get out of there. And so you'll resolve it quickly and just say, yeah, okay, I guess that's probably true, and you'll kind of bow down to them. And I know you don't think that you would do that, but bullies are that masterful. So practice in the mirror saying, what your child did will not be tolerated. Know that they're going to come back on you, and you say it again, what your child did will not be tolerated. And when you're ready to discuss this, I am here for you. And then turn and walk away. Now that parent most likely then will go to the board. Great, because the board also needs to be trained in this, so that the board says, well, clearly based on our code of conduct, what your kid did won't be tolerated. So that consistency of message, it just allows you as a coach or a teacher or a board member to not engage in a power struggle. Sorry, I wish I had so much more time, but I hope that made sense.
No, that was great. I think, no, I know this is a topic we could talk about for hours.
Yeah.
All right, so I think you just kind of answered this though, but how do you manage a parent that disagrees their child maybe bullying another person?
Sorry, say that one again.
So how do you manage a parent that disagrees that their child's behavior is bullying another person?
Yeah, and that's through documentation.
Okay. All right.
If you haven't documented it, it does become he said, she said.
Okay.
And coaches, you often, I mean, you have your phone on with you during practice, make those notes right then and there, or a clipboard. I mean, I'm not sure many of you carry a clipboard, but most of you have that notebook. Like, don't leave it. Try and write it down before the end of that practice or that, swim meet or whatever it is, so you don't forget.
Okay. I've got one more here. It's how do you manage the fine line in competitive sport between motivating and praising and what may be perceived as bullying? The example here is a soccer coach who would call a missed shot or pass, missed shot or a bad pass, but then they would praise when you made a good pass. Is there a fine line for this type of coaching? I was used to it, but new players and their parents may find it rude.
Yeah, well, and sport has changed in that way. What used to be okay, that no parent would question or no kid would question, is now, you do need to be careful as a coach. And so I guess the easiest way for me to answer that question is just say, if you're repeatedly picking on a child or repeatedly undermining the team or not making them feel valued, and you're not balancing it with all the positive, then that's a problem. But even if you're balancing it with the positive, I think it's time to sort of step back and find more positive ways of instructing them to change whatever they did, that poor pass or whatever. Now, as coaches, as parents, we're gonna we're going to yell sometimes, we're going to get frustrated and angry, and that's one of those characteristics I talk to parents about that often will be displayed by a coach that seems like bullying, but it is not. You have the right to yell, you have the right to hold players to a high expectation. Well, the older they get, for sure. You do not have the right to belittle, to undermine, to, you know, intimidate repeatedly. I guess that's the best way I can describe it.
Well, that's great. We've got one here from Jen. What if you're receiving a complaint that bullying is happening outside of practice when you're not seeing it?
Yeah, and that's where it comes right back down to the importance of having the conversation, the education with the team, the players, the athletes, that the expectation is, you know, really, you don't have to like everybody on this team, you don't have to be friends with everyone, but you do have to respect every single one, and this team does not tolerate bullying. So if you see the bullying happening in the locker room or on the bus or wherever outside of the sport, you need to speak up and tell the person to stop, and that's where the skill set, we teach kids, you know, their tool belt of skills to handle bullying without allowing it to escalate. So they need to speak up, and if it continues, sometimes that athlete just needs to, you know, be told to stop, and because they think it's funny, they don't realize, and until anybody tells them to stop, they're going to keep doing it. So speak up. If it doesn't stop, the expectation is then they need to let the coach know. So it's that silent majority. It's all about mobilizing that group, the eyes and the ears of your sport team.
Awesome. And we'll take one last question here. With coaches not allowed in the dressing room, how do you get around the whole, like, you know, he said, she said, or they said, they said?
Yeah, and this is well, we just had a big incident here in Calgary with the hockey team, where a coach wasn't in the locker room, and of course it made news, it made national news. My understanding is in most organizations, there is an expectation that one adult is in the locker room. And I don't know if that's just provincial or that's now sort of national safe sport. I know it used to be called, what was your term? The rule of two. And now it's just been changed. What is the term that they use now?
The rule of two is that there needs to be, best case scenario, 2 certified coaches with every athlete. But it's still the rule of 2.
Yeah.
An athlete, basically, the rule of 2 means like there should always be 3. There should never be any athlete left alone with a coach.
Alone with a parent, or alone with a coach or a parent. So I guess, I mean, the locker room is where the bulk of it is happening in sports. And so at what point do we balance the safety of the kids and the well-being of kids for their privacy? You know, I would say they're in this day and age, especially with electronics coming out and videotaping and taking pictures and everything else that's going on in the locker room, there should be an adult in the locker room.
All right, well, thank you, Lisa. We're going to wrap it up for tonight, but as Lisa mentioned, if you have any questions that come to you later on or that we weren't able to ask tonight, please just reach out to Lisa directly, and she'll be more than happy to help. You can also reach out to us at the Coaches Association anytime, and we are also happy to chat any way we can help. So I want to thank Lisa very much for being with us tonight. I can see all the comments coming in the chat that people not only found this really great, but also like incredibly informative. And I think a lot of people learned something they didn't know at the beginning of this, which is always what we love to hear. So thank you for that. And we will be following up in the next few days with the handout that Lisa's prepared, as well as the sample code of conduct. We'll also include a link to the recording as well, because I know I saw some things in here in the chat about wanting to share this with their organizations. and other coaches that they think would really benefit from this. So you'll receive all of that in an email in the coming days. And if you haven't had a chance to copy or click through to the link in the chat to get your PD point, that will be there for another couple minutes. And we'll also follow up in the email with it again, so you can't miss it. And that'll remain open for a few days as well. So thank you again to Lisa for being here tonight, and thank you to everyone for joining. I hope everyone had a great time. Yes.
Sarah, can I just give a very shameless plug as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
I would, especially in this world of lockdowns, etc., with everybody doing webinars, absolutely love to do some parent webinars with if sports want to get together and host a webinar for parents. I mean, they are a critical piece in this world of bully prevention. So you know, just keep that in mind. Thank you.
No,
Thank you for that.
absolutely.
Okay.
No, you're more than entitled to do that. And also, you know, you're right. Education is about everybody buying into it, and certainly something we believe that everybody needs to, from the parents to the administrators to the coaches to the athletes themselves. Education is really important. So. Yeah, please reach out to Lisa if you have any questions about the content tonight, setting up your own webinar, or whatever else, and we will reach out with the handouts in the coming days. So thank you very much, and I hope everyone has a wonderful evening.
Thank you.